Investors are still a little bit on the sidelines. I mean, they're very interested by fitness. They like to see the turnaround, but they also feel like, a regional player is not as attractive as a national player. They also feel like, maybe a franchise concept has more legs than a non-franchise concept. And while some people view the public markets might beckon, the public markets are not easy and they can be difficult. If you miss a number for whatever reason, your stock can just take years to recover. So it's a little bit risky. But there is a lot of capital on the sidelines, and there's a lot of people looking to invest, and then the health and wellness and fitness industry will always thrive.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, hosted by Chrissy Van. Together, we're uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. Today, we have a very special episode with a guest that hardly needs any introduction to anyone in the fitness industry. I'm honored to have a true icon, which is none other than Mark Mastrov. As the founder of 24 Hour Fitness and the visionary behind hundreds of clubs worldwide, Mark has reshaped the fitness industry on a global scale, continuing to drive innovation and expansion in fitness. You're not going to want to miss what is on offer in this episode because we're exploring emerging trends and investments for 2025, taking a global perspective through key markets like Australia, New Zealand, Asia, the Middle East, and the Americas. Plus, we're going to be diving into how venture capital's fueling the next wave of growth. Stay tuned for invaluable insights from one of the greatest minds in fitness. Before we get to it, be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly. I'm your host, Chrissy Van, and this is ATFW. Well, I am thrilled. Mark Mastrov joining me here, and you have traveled all the way to Vancouver, and on recording date, Thanksgiving Day. So how thankful are we that it delivered on the rainy weather we're so known for?
Well, I'm looking forward to a great meal tonight, so being here for Thanksgiving is awesome.
Yeah, I'm very excited to join you for that as well. And I'm really happy to have you here because I know that you're going to be joining us for our fitness forecast, where we'll really get granular about some of the investment opportunities within the industry. But what I have you for here today is kind of getting that global perspective of what we can expect heading into 2025. So we're going to go by geographic area here and kind of starting off in Australia and New Zealand. What key investment opportunities do you see emerging in 2025 within those regions?
And we're talking 100% around fitness, right? So, if you're talking about growth, the kind of lower, we call them HVLP, high value, low price market is expanding heavily in Australia and New Zealand right now. A lot of brands are growing. A lot of entry in the market. They seem to be performing really well. Mostly working the fringe markets, not necessarily in the big cities because real estate's so hard to acquire and so expensive there. So they've kind of worked the outer territories, and it's interesting to watch. Also, boutique is growing still very rapidly there. Pilates is booming in Australia as it is in most of the world right now. Yoga, still some of the F45 businesses are doing pretty well there. So boutique is still climbing very rapidly. And a lot of it's because Australia is built around like New Zealand and what they call shires. We get the Lord of the Rings terminology to a certain extent there. And they
admittedly, I've never seen any of them.
All right. Well, they call them shires. They're small communities, 25,000 and under. And, the Anytime Fitnesses of the world, the Snaps, and boutique do really well in those markets. The bigger box players can't really penetrate. So there, and then little communities where it's, densely populated walking. So you are in an area where you can't find, call it 2,000 meters. You have to do something smaller. So boutique does well there. So that market continues to grow and perform well. And because, both of them are beach communities where people are very body conscious, obviously, fitness is a big part of everybody's life.
Yeah, absolutely. On that real estate side, though, can you expand a little bit about what that looks like on the ground? Because I know here in Canada, for example, interest rates have been on such a climb. In the States, it was the same deal. So heading into 2025, we have seen those rate cycles improve. So by default, do you think some of those larger markets might see more opportunities versus those smaller market investments?
Yeah, great question. What I think most people thought coming through and out of the pandemic was that landlords would have a lot of empty space and real estate numbers would come down. But in reality, what happened is the landlords decided just to hold on and not reduce their rates and maybe increase them. And then you came into a market that did not have a lot of empty space as you thought. And if you found something, it was on the more expensive side. And then you get into these CAM charges, as we call it, these additional charges, the soft costs, the management costs of real estate by landlords. And those are climbing rapidly, mainly due to inflation. So insurance is higher, energy is higher, labor is higher, marketing is higher. So those costs are coming up dramatically and adding to the overall gross expense of your real estate. So Australia is no different, and New Zealand is no different than the rest of the world. They're all facing that as well. So you have to be very, very smart about how you negotiate your leases if you're going to enter the space. And one of the biggest things is to cap these CAM charges so that they can't be higher than a certain level, whether it's 3% per year, 10% every 5 years, whatever you can do with a landlord to agree so that if inflation hits, you're not paying 7 or 8% in a given year, which can dramatically increase your rent.
Well, and you highlight there when you talk about electricity costs, rent costs, obviously it's been really difficult for a lot of operators. And obviously we're in Canada here, so I know that there's been a lot of petitioning the government to help the fitness industry out and make gym memberships tax deductible. We haven't made headway there. Obviously, you and I have talked a lot about the FIT Act, and I know you've expressed sentiments. They've been trying to do that for years. And Australia, the same thing. There's been a lot of articles about can there be any help from the government to help move this. And I found from the Grattan Institute, they said Australia invests far less in illness prevention than other wealthy countries like Canada and the UK. Think Tank said we're sleepwalking into a sicker future that will condemn millions of Australians to living with avoidable disease and disability. We see this as a problem globally in so many different regions, but do you feel like there is headway that could happen in a place like Australia or in New Zealand in regards to government incentives to get more people moving?
Yes, it's always a big question mark for all of us to better understand why government can't pass a simple law that would allocate $300 or $500 a year towards a gym membership as tax deductible. It's not a big number. They give a lot of other incentives. But for whatever reason, they get hung up on it. Part of it's probably because Big Pharma controls a lot of lobbying and a lot of funding that goes through government. And pharma, of course, wants to see people on a pill versus in a gym. And so no disrespect to pharma as they do good work in preventing and helping people extend life. But, there is a reality, and you can see it through many podcasts. You can see it through all kinds of social media that there is a point that you have to say, okay, enough is enough, and we really need to get off all these pills that we don't need to be on, and we need to be inside exercising in a gym, or at best outside exercising, riding a bike, running on the beach, running in the forest, whatever you're doing. Just stay active, stay healthy, stay fit. That's our focus. To give a small credit, government's sleeping on themselves by not doing so.
Yeah, without question. Just with you bringing up pills there, I can't help but think of GLP-1s. And obviously, we know the intersection within the fitness industry. And in the United States, it's definitely more of a pharmaceutical culture embedded. Like even when I look from the Canadian perspective, the minute I hop the border, the adverts that I see on TV are very, very different, and people tend to embrace it a lot more. What's the sentiment like in the fitness industry in regards to adoption of GLP-1 related programs within Australia?
Australia is not, from what I've seen in my last visit, it's not as big a focus yet. It's coming as maybe other parts of the world. The GLP-1 drugs are interesting. They do have a lot of side effects that are becoming more apparent. More knowledge is being gained on a daily basis. It's not like a lot of people are on them, not tens of millions. It's probably, small, few hundreds of thousands, few millions starting to get involved and more. And reality is what we're seeing is that, as a drug that was formerly focused on diabetes, it has a tendency to also eat into your muscle fiber once it removes the fat from burning through your system. So it's a blocker. And what ends up happening is that you have to exercise. You have to have some strength training resistance, whether that's doing push-ups at home or throwing some boxes around or lifting your luggage at the airport, whatever it might be. Reality is you need to get into a gym and you need to have a strength training program. And with gyms now cost effectively being so low where you could join a fitness world and spend, $10, $15, $20 a month, it's ridiculous not to do that. It's like 2 Starbucks and you could have a whole month of exercise. And I think GLP-1 will play really well into the fitness industry. Australia, it's just starting to become more of a conversation, but not a big conversation there yet.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch because obviously here it's a fever pitch. I can't even scroll on any social media feed. Obviously, because of what I do for a living, the algorithm targets me a bit, but it's constantly advertised. So it'll be interesting to see the evolution. One thing I want to revisit that you brought up was Pilates, because even I was just at Beyond Active. It's all anyone's talking about. Pilates is nothing new, but this massive resurgence is happening. I think Gen Z is actually a huge driver of it with how they have advertised it for the industry on TikTok and Instagram. But there are a lot of companies coming out of Australia. Like, for example, I know Your Reformer has just started their expansion into the United States market, but I interviewed the couple that founded that, and theirs was all born out of a pandemic need. So their gym shut down, and then they ended up doing to consumer, so actually selling the reformers, now more on the B2B side. But why do you feel it's such a hub there that Pilates has had this huge spark?
Well, it's a very, as we mentioned earlier, it's a very body conscious, fitness conscious marketplace. It's kind of like California to a certain extent. It's a beach community. So a lot of Australia is focused on, exercise and strength and activity and sport. So it's a country that really, really is fascinated by sport and values that. Kids grow up in that way, maybe the way we did in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Australia is still very focused. You look at the Olympics, that small little island's in the top 5 every year.
True.
Yeah, they crush it. So really, really good athletes there. Sports on the television 24/7, 365 there, and they're very focused. Having said that, because Pilates has been proven to strengthen, stretch, increase flexibility, build core, which are strong points for an athlete, an athletic body, and then even for the weekend warrior, the golfer, whoever it might be. A lot of people are finding, again, Pilates to be super effective. And then you get back to the comment earlier about the shires and dropping a Pilates studio in an area where there's 25,000 people or less, or a small little dense market, inside a city where you have to walk everywhere. It fits perfectly. Put 6, 8, 10 reformers and you have a nice little business. One person can run it. You don't need a lot of labor, and off it goes. There's a really cool concept down there right now called 24/7 Pure Pilates, which has reformers that have access so you can come at any time you want to take a class 24 hours a day. And they're growing, and they're very interesting. I think they could be a category disruptor because like a Peloton, they have a piece of Pilates equipment that allows you to exercise in front of a screen. So if you come in, they can take you through a program, and they've got, I guess, hundreds of workouts on the screen that you can, subscribe to while you're in the gym at 1 in the morning or 7 in the morning. And then they have classes, of course, as well. So I think Pilates has been around forever, like yoga and every other type of class, but it's having a little bit of a resurgence, not to a certain extent because of the pandemic. I just think because it works. It always has, always will. It's just been more expensive and aimed at a little bit more of the boutique client who might want to spend $200-$300 a month to exercise.
Yeah, and I also see the adoption by a lot more males in that subset.
Yeah, no,
and I think just from like the sports industry too, a lot of athletes are promoting it, and it's that trickle effect. Also, you've said shires a few times, so I will watch Lord of the Rings.
All right, there you go. Just watch one and then see how it goes.
I was like, shires are going to keep coming up. I'm going to have to make sure that I catch up on this.
Yeah.
Well, kind of traveling here to Asia because, you're speaking to Australia. They're super sports oriented, beach communities, and that's kind of why they operate the way they do. One would say when it comes to the Asian markets, high levels of digital adoption is something that they're very known for there. So how do you feel that will impact investing in the fitness sector? What are kind of the disruptors in the space that are happening there from the digital perspective?
Well, yeah, great question. I mean, what you're hearing from everybody is that people are using less and less personal trainers, and they're more focused on using their phones or iPads when they come into the gym. Yes and no. I think a little bit of it is that people are able to, as they mature into the marketplace, effectively work out without a trainer. A trainer in the days gone by would really help push you along and help get you motivated and make you show up, right? So all of a sudden you want to train before work. You want to come in at 6 in the morning. When you turn the alarm clock off, there's a lot of reasons to say I'm staying in bed. But
the rain today would be one for many, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, I got up this morning to go work out, and I was like, oh, it's so nice in my room. But I was like, oh, no, I'm going to go work out. So I got up and went and did it. But when you have a trainer you're paying for, all of a sudden you're like, God, I have to go work out because I'm about to spend $100, whatever you're spending, to go see my trainer. If I don't show up, I'm spending it. So you're motivated to get up, you get a good workout in. And then we've always known that if you work out in the morning early, you're burning calories throughout the day. So you get some extra credit too. So from that standpoint, I think that digital around personal wellness and fitness and training is going to continue to enhance and grow. And there's a lot out there. There's a ton free and a ton paid for. But what's most interesting is information, right? So if you're a social media person, like my wife might sit on the phone and scroll for 2 hours and not lift her head up. And I'm like, what are you doing? You just spent 2 hours on your phone. But she's looking at, different fitness things that kind of come through on her feeds, whether it's through TikTok or Instagram or any place you see. There's influencers out there that are talking about different ways to train and different methods to train and talking about, Pilates and yoga and stretching. And so there's a lot of information digitally that comes out. And the West's influence in Asia is also big, always has been. You want to look around the world. So I want to see how people are training in Australia or training in Europe or training in Asia. And 20 years ago, I couldn't do that. Now I can do it anytime I want. So from a digital standpoint, I do think that information is broad and free and interesting, and motivation is now there, which I think is really cool. So people are being motivated through social media to get up and get out and get after it, which I think bodes well. In Asia, reality is that most people, it's not an area where you have a lot of homes and a lot of real estate. You have some, but a lot of it's apartment-based. And so you can't put a lot of equipment in your apartment. It's got to be something small. So you try to get to the little gym nearby you, whether it's a boutique or someplace else. But penetration is still some of the lowest in the world. And in time, it will continue to grow. And I think, they'll chase after the U.S. and some of the other countries that are into the high teens, low 20s penetration-wise.
Well, and I know that you do a lot of business there as well. So when it comes to the Asian markets, what are the key ones that are seeing the biggest amount of growth? Geographically, what areas are growing the most right now? The trailblazers, so to speak.
Well, it's a question you got to step back and say, okay, well, let's look at population base. Oh, China's got 1 billion people, so you got to say China, right?
Fair.
Because there's so many people there. But if you talk about, what countries are pushing, boundaries in a big way that are moving very fast, Japan, of course, has been awesome. Anytime Fitness, right, has over 1,000 locations in Japan. 1,000.
Wow.
Right? Pretty incredible. If you go back and look at some of the old boutiques that are into Japan, there's some that have an enormous number of locations because, again, although Japanese won't call them shires, they are in small communities where you can't put big boxes. But there's a lot of success in fitness there. The Japanese are very dedicated, and it's a good market. Vietnam is exploding and continuing to perform well. Some of Southeast Asia is starting to perform at a better rate. Indonesia has a great amount of love for fitness. Malaysia, Thailand, all those markets are booming. And if you want to slide over and talk about India and other places, there's a lot of opportunity there too. But Asia's still early days, still trying to figure out. It's moved into kind of a cost-effective $1 a day kind of market, $300 a year. As I look at it, a lot of gyms have success in that price point range. And more and more people are exercising, but still very low penetration overall in most countries, as far as you can see. Taiwan's always been a great fitness market. I can go on and on, but there's a lot. Hong Kong, a lot of great fitness markets in Asia.
Yeah, it's interesting, just obviously looking from my perspective here and that old algorithm that gets you, but I've actually seen a lot of advertisements for touristic fitness experiences in Southeast Asia. So where it's like different resorts come down and have a fitness experience. So even that's a huge component. But when you are talking about your Vietnams, Thailands, I know that you mentioned in certain areas just due to the type of housing, it's more boutique. But when we look at North America right now, there's that huge intersection of fitness spaces becoming more well-rounded, a holistic health center, longevity. Is that penetrating the market there at all as well? Or is it really just these grassroots where it's more about the traditional gym or the traditional boutique experience for the moment?
Good question again. So What's really interesting is that if you get to Asia, it's very much a service-oriented society in some ways. And so if you get into the spa aspect of the world, Asia, by far, in my opinion, has the best spa services, best spa amenities anywhere, which is based almost around longevity to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. So they have all of their special secret sauces in the way that they do their spas and the way they present it and the way they service it. So that's always been a mainstay at your hotel kind of experience and spa experience there. So have they morphed into longevity in a big way? Not yet. It's coming, but not huge for the masses because the masses probably aren't that interested in it. They have a good diet and a longevity, and so it's not as big of a focus. They don't have the Western diet where we're all basically thinking that we might die at 50 because we've been drinking and eating all this crappy food. So
there's a lot of frozen aisles in those grocery stores.
There is. And so from a standpoint of Asia, I don't think longevity is as big of a focus yet as it is around the rest of the world.
For those that are looking to expand in the Asian market or make investments there, what is it like from a regulatory perspective? What are some of the barriers or hurdles that should really be strongly considered if somebody's looking to enter that space?
Yeah, so a lot of it's tax-based, right? So where I end up spending a lot of time is legal and tax. How do you structure and how do you set up? And a lot of the countries, you just can't come in as a Western person and just own and buy, and you have to set up offshore companies that can then invest inside the country. And so a lot of it's just getting really good tax advice from somebody and good legal advice. And sometimes you have to have an appointee in a country that holds some of the rights for you because you don't have any rights because you're not a citizen there. Right. So you have to navigate all of that, and there's some risk that comes with that. But generally, you can find a path to get there and operate. But it's not easy and not simple.
Yeah, fair enough. How about in regards to like mergers and acquisitions? What does that look like in that space?
Again, if you're going to go and acquire, it depends where your capital is coming from. So if you're bringing Western capital into Eastern markets, very difficult because the Western capital doesn't always want to apply there and doesn't allow you to apply there. A lot of it has to do with exchange rates because you might come in and acquire something today at a certain rate, and then that could devalue over the next couple of years, and all your good work to bring back a nice return could get wiped out because of the devaluation of that particular dollar. Yeah. I can remember entering Australia and the dollar was 1-to-1 to the U.S. dollar. Today it's like 67 cents to the dollar. So I'm 33% down theoretically from when I entered in the market. So I have to really outperform to extrapolate anything back one day. So that's something you have to navigate. If you're using Eastern monies, right, the interest rates are much higher than you're going to get in the West, unless you're in Japan where there's sometimes no interest, but hard to borrow. You have to put up assets. And so sometimes it's like, well, look, we'll let you borrow $5 million, but you need to put $5 million in our bank. And you're like, okay, why would I do that? So it isn't easy to raise capital there. It can be done. You can find venture groups that will support and back you, but acquiring there, that's why you don't see a lot of it. Acquiring there is not easy.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, and I do want to acknowledge as well that within this conversation, we're skipping Europe completely with intention because Chris Smith, who is the chairman of the Health and Fitness Association, is traveling to the European Congress. So we're going to be hearing a solid debrief from him when we return. So I just don't want anyone to think that we've completely left them out. But we are going to move on to a really fascinating market, and Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. And the reason why I say so fascinating, and obviously those in the industry know, as to our point earlier, so many governments around the globe really aren't providing those incentives to get their populations moving, despite having quite sick societies with a very solvable problem in regards to disease prevention that would save the healthcare system boatloads of money. But to your point earlier, pills are big business, so pharmaceuticals really being a blockade there. Meanwhile, we look at Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, and it really is about bolstering this healthy wellness society. They're doing massive investments there. So tell me a little bit about how that might be affecting capital flows into 2025 and just like the surge of dollars to support this.
Yeah, so if you go to the Middle East, right, and Saudi is taking a look at Dubai and Abu Dhabi and seeing how they've, to a certain degree, brought tremendous amounts of capital and tourism and wealth into the region and said, hey, we want to be in the game as well. And so they've deployed capital and begun a process here as they move forward with their new king and everything else they're doing. And it's really, really interesting. I mean, fitness will become a bigger component of the marketplace. There are some chains now north of 100 locations. And I think that, with a 40 million population base in Saudi, it gets more and more interesting. Not easy for a Western person to understand how to grow there. So you probably need to find a partner or really think through how you want to operate in that kind of hemisphere. But, if you get into Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and some of the other countries, it's really, really fascinating and it's starting to move quite well. There are a lot of Western people there, more than you think, right? And so their trends kind of, emanate into the marketplace. And like you've seen in Bollywood in India, all of a sudden somebody's got some vascularity and some muscle mass, and you're a young, Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone, and people navigate and start watching you in films, and they want to emulate and look like you. So you're seeing the same thing in the Middle East a little bit. There are some really amazing athletes and people there that, we don't get to see much. I was looking at the Olympia that just finished up in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I was just going to say in bodybuilding, it's
in the bodybuilding,
crazy.
And the kid that took second in the Olympia was from Iran, and I mean he was a massive, phenomenal person, and great symmetry, and there's big weightlifting people and a lot of gym people all throughout the Middle East, and I think you'll see more and more of those folks show up on the stages of bodybuilding and athleticism in the years ahead. Having said that, I think the Middle East has had Western influence around fitness for a long time, probably north of 30 years now. But it is continuing to grow, continuing to get better, and continuing to be more and more interesting.
How about in regards to what type of fitness is moving there? Because really what I see a lot of is more on that luxury side. So would you agree with that sentiment, or are there opportunities in different niches?
Yeah, so I was just in Dubai 2 weeks ago.
Oh, amazing.
So, yeah.
Caught you at the right time.
Yeah.
You moved from the Shire into Dubai.
That's
Excellent.
Right. I got out of the Shire and the green and went into the dry, hot. It's less, to me, it's less luxury. There is luxury there, but it's a lot of, regular, general, cost-effective fitness. There's a lot of UFC gyms in Dubai. There was a ton of Fitness First at one time in Dubai. There's a ton of boutiques, and back to our Pilates, a lot of Pilates there, a little bit of everything. So it's mature in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Saudi's just starting. I haven't been to Riyadh in a bit, but it is growing very aggressively there, and a lot of Western influence. And so you see a Cristiano Ronaldo show up playing football there, and it brings a different style. His whole look, feel, and how fit he is, everything else. People start to say, okay, I want to look like that, feel like that, be an athlete like that, and he inspires. So at the end of the day, it'll surprise you. There is luxury there and is valued, but there's a lot of people that can't afford that, just like everywhere else in the world. And so your simple gyms and your like I like the UFC gym model there because you've got boxing and MMA, and then your general fitness is flourishing and doing very, very well.
Obviously, this is a complex question because I know there's no way that you can get granular about it because it would be difficult, but you do have involvement in UFC gym, and you're speaking there to getting into these markets as a Westerner does have complications, and it's best to have partners. What does that process even, like, what are the biggest barriers in that process to make the leap into those types of markets where, regulatory wise, it would be very different and have strict structure? Yeah,
a lot of it's just picking the right person or people or group to work with, right? And that's just sometimes luck of the draw. I mean, a lot of times you meet people, you get along well, you spend a lot of time, you break bread, you get a year or two underneath, and then you say, let's go. And then you go, and sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times it's who they pick as their leaders, or if they're the leaders themselves. But, you have influence and you have expertise. What I always love is we call it cracking the code, trying to crack the code in a given marketplace. And every market is different. Where you get into the market. How do you navigate? How do you figure it out? And sometimes it's quickly done. Sometimes it takes years. But once you crack the code, so to speak, in all the different facets, it becomes a very successful, flourishing opportunity that you can have a lot of fun with. We've got a fantastic partner down there, Hamad Al-Sayer, who's a Kuwaiti and very entrepreneurial. He, by chance, also has a company called Caribou Coffee out of Canada, and he's the largest franchisee for Caribou Coffee in the world.
This is good for me to know. I'm a coffee aficionado. I do not survive without coffee.
Yeah. So he's a really fascinating guy, and he's opened, I think, 300 Caribou Coffees throughout the Middle East, mostly in Dubai.
Wild.
He's done very well. So he's a very entrepreneurial guy, very Western in some of his thinking, but he's really interesting, and we found a good friend and partner to work with there, and we've been together for some time now. So it's just building relationships all over and finding people that you can support, help, admire, and push, and that makes it fun.
Yeah, I mean, I always appreciate advice like that because it really just comes down to the simplest of things where you're like, it's about people. And at the end of the day, sometimes you jive, sometimes you don't. But going with that gut feeling can take you a long way in this life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we talked about Vision 30 there, or 2030, and Neom is one of the big real estate projects that's going in. And we had a previous discussion in the other markets about that intersection of longevity, wellness, and really a lot of these real estate developments that are massive and quite luxurious, I must say. Tell me a little bit about that growing expansion and emphasis on the longevity component and what they're aiming to create there.
So this could be a really long answer. I can make it really short.
Excellent. I was like, it's a podcast, so let it breathe. Tell me all the things.
Yeah, so there's more and more information is coming on the human genome and everything else that we know about extending life. There is a view that in the next 5 to 10 years that they will have the capability to help you focus on living a healthy life north of 100 to 120 years, right? Which seems a little insane. If you look at what Elon Musk is doing and some of the crazy things you see on his social media, restoring eyesight, dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia and all the things that people are focused on, we're moving very, very fast right now. And so when you get into longevity, about extending your life, a lot of that's around medical, right? And scanners and taking a look at your body. I can name a half a dozen close friends in the last year that have gone into a body scan and it's found something that they never would have thought of, from a tumor in their brain to prostate cancer to things that weren't picked up in a normal medical exam. And they've gone in and had a second and third opinion, and it's been ratified, and they've had surgery and extended their life, been able to take care of it. So you've got things like that coming. And then, of course, you've got pills and drugs and all kinds of fun stuff moving very fast. For the simplest of terms, to me, it's a little bit about recovery. Right. So if you break it way down and get past this longevity piece and talk about recovery, a lot of times we exercise, whether you're in sport or whether you're just a weekend warrior or you just do it because you like the endorphin high. But the soreness of the body always plays a role. And now you have all these really cool tools, from HyperIce or TheraBody or, hydro beds or massage chair. There's so many simple things that anybody can get on for low dollars that come free with your membership at a gym that allows you to feel better, be more active, go out and exercise, play golf, play tennis, play pickleball, whatever it might be. It's changed a little bit into this piece of longevity to me being about movement. So my mother's 89 and she still is moving pretty good, but nowhere near where she once did. So I'm constantly talking to her about, you got to stretch, you got to move, you got to walk, you got to stay active. And I think what you find is that the more active you are at an age, the more capabilities you have to extend and move into longevity. But when you get into hydrogen water and when you get into vitamins and you get into superfoods for superhumans or whatever else you're focused on, there's just so much we can talk about and spend time on, whether it's nutrition or whether it's apparatuses or whether it's drugs or whether it's just the capability to intravenously take something to make you feel better. It's just really interesting times.
Yeah, especially if you do have access to the means to use some of the biotech tools that are available. I mean, not that I'm like a big Kardashians person, but there is that Kardashian effect. So to your point with the body scans, I know it ended up trending because they did an episode where it was that MRI just for the sake of having the MRI so that you can identify things in the body. Obviously, at this point for the population, that's not something that's available to everybody. But we know as these luxury features start to advance, then eventually that becomes available to the general population. And as crazy as it sounds to live to like 120, when you look at it, look at what our lifespan was not that long ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, if I'm 120 my last 20 years, I'm an invalid sitting in a chair and I got
Who wants
dementia.
that?
That's one thing.
Yeah.
But if I'm able to move and I'm capable of keeping my body and my engine running well, and I can fix whatever it is that ails me, and I can, basically be pretty active into my hundreds, why not? It just depends. Like you said, there's always a view that, you can push and push and push. But there's also stats out right now that, our children will not live us, because of the way that foods are prepared and the things that are coming through into their bodies in today's
Environmental
world.
pollutants, all of it.
Yeah, so you don't know where we'll end up. But I do feel like what I see is if I look at myself at my age compared to my father at my age, it's night and day. I'm much fitter, much more active. I feel pretty sharp. And so you look at that and say, well, look, my dad probably wasn't thinking that way. My dad lived until he was 87, so he had a pretty good long life. He could have maybe lived longer. But at the same time, everybody you talk to is like saying, yeah, my grandmother just passed away at 98, 97, 94, like things you never heard before. Mm-hmm. I remember 20, 30 years ago, if somebody got into their 90s, it was amazing.
Oh, yeah. You'd see like the retirement thing on the news, like it's Edith's birthday today.
Yeah, exactly. So it's coming. We just have to decide how we want to live and what we want to live for and what we're focused on. And, when you talk to, I talk to my kids who are late teens, early 20s, they're not focused on that at all right now. My wife would love to see them eat better and be more focused on their long-term, livelihoods. But I think, you live to enjoy life and you see what the outcomes are.
Yeah. And to kind of round it back, I would say looking at those markets and the investments that are happening in places like the Middle East and with these communities that are so health conscious and the amount of dollars that are going into that technology, it'll just be interesting to watch to see what comes out of that. Now the destination where we know health and wellness, so many conversations about the other 80% that we don't have in the gym doors. And I don't want to point fingers, but when I crossed the border into the United States, I actually said it many times when I was in New York. Oh, I forgot I was in America. Every time I got served a dish and it was just... I ordered a bowl of tortilla soup that I kid you not was bigger than my entire torso. And that was on the appetizer page. So I'm like, we have problems here, people. But luckily, I know that fitness centers really are the solution. And the thing that's been really fascinating for me, I've always been a fitness enthusiast. I did competitions. It's been at the forefront and a pillar of my life. But transitioning to working in the industry side and starting to understand it more and more, it's been really refreshing to see the industry come together and change their marketing voice collectively to we are social hub, we are mental health hub, and all the rest. As we look, though, when it comes to capital trends into 2025 in the American market, what do you see flourishing when it comes to the type of facilities? Is it HVLPs that are dominating? Is it luxury spaces, boutique spaces? Because we've had many conversations on the fitness forecasts of the challenges in the American market. So what's the thriving notion heading into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Everybody seems to be performing pretty well. Who's lighting the scoreboard? So if you look at the public companies, Lifetime stock is finally, as I call it, over the Mendoza line. They traded at $18 some years ago, and they've been sitting there underneath that for a long time. They're now finally in the low 20s, and so their numbers look good, and they're doing good work. And so that high-end kind of social center, fitness center, country club style facility is doing really, really well. If you look at Planet Fitness, their numbers are still pretty strong. They're still growing well, and their stock is up and performing well. If you look at Exponential, the boutique, and they're still a little bit below where their public offering number was, but they've been steadily performing a little bit better each quarter. They're under new leadership, so we'll see how they do. If you look at the regional players, from what you hear, everybody's doing well. Most of the players, in HVLP, the high value, low price, are doing well. And, to a certain extent, fitness has been commoditized in the U.S. People perceive that I shouldn't spend more than $10 or $20 for a multi-million-dollar facility. They're being spoiled. But, like you said, we're in the probably low 20% penetration. Doesn't mean that only 20% belong. It probably means 50% have belonged and 30% are out and 20% are in. So 20% are active and the other 20, 30% have joined and quit and then bounced in and out. And that's sometimes due to just lifestyle, family, et cetera. work, it just takes time away, and you find reasons to not go. Like I said earlier, you hit the alarm button and go back to bed. You don't get up to go exercise. So, if you look at boutiques, there's been some fallout in some of the boutiques. It's been tougher. Margins have been squeezed a little bit, but there are some doing well. You see Orange Theory got merged into Anytime, so you assume that Anytime will help Orange Theory continue to improve as they go forward. So I think fitness is still rocking in the U.S. and still performing really well pretty much across all lines. I think there are certain brands that are on fire right now and performing extremely well, and they're leading the industry. I think Lifetime is probably your high-end country club, wellness, lifestyle type facility. They're very focused on pickleball and other things that are really interesting right now to people. And then you've got HVLP. I think the high risers Crunch, they've been performing extremely well, led by Jim Rowley and his team. They're doing great. And I think Planet's still having good penetration. And then some of the regional guys are out there. They're doing really, really well. I think groups like EOS have done really good business, and the team there has done good work. And then, there's some great Crunch franchisees who are growing rapidly, adding upwards of 10 to 20 locations a year. So, if I step back, that'd be kind of my high-level view. And, we could dig in a little bit from there. But it, seems to be fitness is thriving in the U.S. right now.
Yeah, a couple comments. Whoever is on Crunch's marketing team that does their national social media is nailing it over and over. I have seen so many viral reels just bat it 1,000 out of the park. So I just have to commend whoever is behind that, because I'm somebody, it's funny, I have to create a lot of social media, so I try not to consume. I actually set timers on it, and my friends probably find me highly offensive because I rarely like their stuff because I'm not actually participating in the ecosystem. But I'm like, those get fed to me because of the type of work I do, and I have just pure admiration for it. And then on the Lifetime thing, I know you and I have talked about the real estate market in the United States, and they've had several articles about taking over the vacant mall spaces and reimagining those. And I just think what a smart situation for the landlords of those buildings, which, let's face it, there's no Bed Bath & Beyond that's going to be filling your space. And then it's bringing so much more foot traffic into the entire facility. So I imagine, those deals must be attractive from the landlord side for a Lifetime, for example, coming in, right?
Yeah, it depends what product they're building. They were on a focus of building their 150, 200,000 square foot facility, then building in some workspace so that people could live and work in apartments. They kind of had a whole concept going pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, a little bit less. Real estate's more expensive, more difficult, but they do a really good job identifying real estate and then building their box and getting people in the door. Their projects are very, very expensive, probably upwards of $40 to $50 million projects. But in those big malls of days gone by where a lot of vacancy has occurred and a lot of people don't attend as much, putting one of those facilities or something similar inside there as an anchor is better than maybe an old JCPenney.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, it's pretty solid.
And another thing that you and I discussed when it came to investment for people that are trying to grow, and especially some of those smaller players that perhaps aren't quite as proven quite yet, obviously, due to what we were seeing in the economy, it was a little bit stickier to actually get buy-in from investors. So do you feel in 2025, to our point earlier of how rates are starting to slowly come down, obviously, when we look at the United States, there's a big shift ahead with an election, so perhaps that will change things. But what is the climate when it comes to investors wanting to grow the fitness space?
The investors are still a little bit on the sidelines. They're very interested by fitness. They like to see the turnaround, but they also feel like, a regional player is not as attractive as a national player. They also feel like, maybe a franchise concept has more legs than a non-franchise concept. And while some people view the public markets might beckon, the public markets are not easy and they can be difficult. If you miss a number for whatever reason, your stock can just take years to recover. So it's a little bit risky. But there is a lot of capital on the sidelines, and there's a lot of people looking to invest. And then the health and wellness and fitness industry will always thrive. It goes into 2025, I think, with a lot of opportunities. I think a lot of people are starting to think about exit. They had mature companies in 1920 that they couldn't exit. They've rebuilt in 2021, 22, 23, and now 24. And they're thinking, okay, 25, 26, it's time to go to market. And we'll see. We'll see how the venture community responds.
Yeah, like what type of disruptors do you see happening in that space?
As far as the venture guys, or
Yeah.
I mean, there's players that have been around this space forever, several that invest solely in this space and have performed very, very well. And they're very picky about who they get behind. I think a lot of it will depend on, is the management team staying or leaving? Are they pulling too much money off the table that they're less motivated, or are they going to roll 100% and stay in the deal? So I think if a venture group shows up and you're like, no, I'm not taking a penny off the table, I want to stay, I just want some dry powder to grow, that's probably a more exciting opportunity. If it's, nah, I think I want to sell everything that I have here, that may not fly. So I think a lot of it's going to boil down to the management teams and whether they're sticking around and they're hungry and wanting to grow and getting after it for another 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And I think that's where the rubber will hit the road.
And do you think heading into 2025, is it one that we'll see a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the space?
It would be nice. I think it's time for some of that consolidation to happen, but it's expensive because you have to change brand. And often you're eliminating a brand that's got great visibility, high recognition, and now you're converting it to something else, and you got to start all over. So a lot of times I think it's nice to see it, but reality is it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't want to leave Latin America out, and I know that you do a lot of business there as well. So what is the overall climate like in that market? Because obviously it sounds like a lot of optimism for North America itself. Does that extend?
There are some big companies in Latin America making a lot of noise, and a lot of regional players that have been performing very, very well. But Latin America, in a lot of markets, was hit pretty hard from the pandemic. As you got into places like Mexico, where there are not a lot of hospitals, they just shut down, and they had a mask mandate until October, November of 22.
Jeez.
And so if you wanted to work out in a gym, you had to wear a mask. And even after the end of 22, you weren't able to do Group X classes. You weren't able to have people in the pool. You had different views and rules and regulations depending on whether you're in Mexico City or Guadalajara or wherever. And so a lot of countries in Latin America are still recovering. And the landlords were not willing to cut deals. They're like, no, you owe me all this money.
Right.
Pay it. And a lot of club groups were like, well, we can't do that. So the players that came in after the pandemic, right, have been able to kind of grow. And the players who were in the pandemic have had to defend. And so depending on the marketplace where you are, if the grow person is coming in, so let's take SmartFit out of Brazil, who's a public fund, and they've got a lot of capital. If they decide to come into your market, they might drop 40 locations in 2 or 3 years. And you're not able to grow because you're still paying off your landlords and you've got to defend. And so it just depends on each market. But there are some really good regional players in Peru and in Chile and in probably Colombia. Bodytech there is fantastic. And then you've got SmartFit penetrating each of those markets. They've entered Chile, they've entered Mexico. They're growing with the public funds and they've become a bit of a disruptor.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to watch then, especially because obviously they're the lag behind considering we were able to recover just so much faster. And I think kind of going back to that North America perspective, the consumer had such a profound understanding of what fitness means to their lives. And I think that's really just helped propel the shift that we've seen. I want to end the conversation to talk a little bit about the disrupting trends overall within the fitness industry that you feel we'll see in 2025. Because obviously the 2024 and even 2023 conversation was GLP-1s. Pilates was huge. I know that you mentioned, I believe it was last March, pelvic floor was a space that was really interesting you. But what are, let's say the top 3 or top 5 that you're like, these are going to be the things if we're going to industry conferences that we won't be able to help talk about the entire time?
Yeah, there's so much going on. I think that the biggest trends are going to be around size and amenities. So are you getting bigger, right, and being willing to pay more rent to offer more? And so is cardio being reduced? And so what we're seeing is less and less people riding cardio. riding, as I call it, or using cardio. And then you've got more and more young people entering the space, 20 to 35, and they're looking at platforms, and they're looking at free weights, and they're looking at posing rooms, and they're looking at things that are body conscious, image conscious, TikTok conscious. So that market is continuing to grow. So how are you fitting out your new facilities? And what does it look like when it comes to lighting and materials, and how much are you investing? So that, to me, is the big trend that everybody has to start to focus on. And then, of course, you've got boutique. And taking a room and throwing in 10 Pilates reformers isn't necessarily the answer. How is it fitted out? How is it lit? How is the sound? How is the amenities? All that's kind of coming into play because people want experiences.
Yes.
And so that's a big component that you have to get into. And then, as you talked about longevity, there's more and more items coming into the facilities that people want. Do they want, cold plunges? Can you make that happen? Everybody's like, yep, we're going to put cold plunges in all of our facilities. Well, time out. Can you get it approved by the city, by the county when it comes to handicap? Does it have to drop into the ground so everybody can get access into it? Do you have to have those cranes that drop handicapped people into it?
I don't want to throw them under the bus, but we just saw what happened with the DOJ and LA Fitness, and that's still in progress. So no thing on either side, but that's a very real thing that they're up against at this point.
Yeah, so you've got to navigate and figure all that out. And then you get into red light, right, which is awesome. But what kind of red light is it? And then do they still want tanning? Do they want hydro beds? Do they want IV therapy? So what does your recovery center look like inside your facilities? And those continue to grow. And then how do you charge for it? Is it part of the membership? Is it in addition to? Do you want to have, cryo and cryo chamber? So it's the area that people have to continue to focus on. And then I do think pelvic floor is coming on fast, and a lot of people don't have answers for pelvic floor. And so you got to go out there and decide if you want to invest behind it, buy a pelvic chair and drop it in and have people that have incontinence and other issues, to be able to work on it. So there's a bunch of really neat things coming. And I think as you get to the trade show this year, there'll be a lot of innovation there. And it's not cheap, right? A lot of stuff just isn't cheap, but it's what the member wants. And it's what differentiates you versus the competition. And it's also drawing new people into your facilities that you don't normally see. So I do think it'll play a role. But at the end of the day, it's like what's inside your facility, right? Lifetime will say, I got a lot of pickleball, and they're getting the pickleball crowd, but that's expensive space for a handful of people. But they can afford to do it outside. Inside the general box, you're looking at places, that Fusion Gym that's in Philly and different places where they've got a $10 million facility, and it's just equipment like you've never seen before. And they're trying to charge $80 a month and get 10,000 people to come in and exercise there together, and spend big money for access to a lot of equipment and be in a cool space. And so, it's interesting times. I don't think we're over the hill or the hurdle yet. I think 26, 27 will kind of settle in, but 25 will continue to be another game-changing year.
One of my favorite sentiments that you said there, and again, it goes back to the simplistic solutions that aren't necessarily cheap out of the gate, but so worth it. And that's how you verbalize TikTok conscious, because it is so true. I think gone are the days, if you are in your early 20s, you do not want to walk into a fluorescent space. And that just is the way it is. And we've talked a lot about, filming in gyms, and obviously that can be controversial, but it also can be the thing that generates free UGC in your marketing campaign. So why wouldn't you want that? Create a space that they're going to go take the photos or take the videos and have your hashtag up there. It's just simple solutions that I think can really make a difference to the bottom line. And so I just love that in your trends, it's like the simple solution, you might as well invest in it. So Mark, I so appreciate you taking the time and coming to see us here in Vancouver. And I know that we're going to be hanging out in Vegas soon to talk more when it comes to the forecast of financial trends going forward. But I really appreciate your time and your expertise today.
Well, it's always enjoy seeing you. And thanks again for continuing to push the message out there and getting behind the fitness industry and letting everybody hear a little bit about what we try to do to make people's lives greater.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Chrissy Van. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.